Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Robert Phoenix, and getting a bit of a late start today. Well, I guess it's a on-time start. If I wanted to start at 1 o'clock, but I apologize. Raw Castaldo was supposed to be joining me today, but he had to cancel kind of at the last minute, so I've had to go on the fly here and put some stuff together because I wasn't really prepared to do a solo show today. But that's okay. Probably won't do like a huge 90-minute, 2 hour Friday FARcast extravaganza. Rob will be back. We'll get him on in a couple weeks. So for those of you who wanted to connect with some of that information, don't despair. In the meantime, I reconnected with somebody who I had on a couple of other shows back in the old Blog Talk radio days. And some of you may remember her. Her name is LaFay Farrar. And LaFay is a pretty gifted kind of psychic astrologer medium. She has a book out. She did a book on twin flames. So I talked with LaFay today, and I asked her if she could be on the show, and she's working at a bookstore, New Age bookstore, where she lives, doing readings today. But she will be on the Sunday night show, which is good. So if you haven't experienced LaFay, she's fantastic. And maybe what we could do is maybe we could get like maybe 3 or 4 charts that LaFay and I could look at. And by the way, LaFay specializes in relationships, and she specializes in the twin flame, the twin soul, and the soulmate stuff. So I would have loved to have had her on today, but we'll get her on Sunday night. And if you haven't experienced her before, she's fantastic. So that's the word for the Sunday night show. Well, more, of course, on Sunday night. It'll be really so. If you want to have maybe just now, send me your birth time, birth date, and I'll run. Maybe I'll bring up a few of the charts randomly. Maybe I'll set them ahead of time to LaFay so she can look at them. And if you've done it before in the past, and we've looked at your charts in the past, maybe let me get somebody else to try. So maybe 3 or 4. I can't promise who it's going to be, but we'll try it that way, and that will be interactive, and we'll be able to see what we can determine, or at least get LaFay's input, especially from the relationship standpoint. So it should be good. Should be a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, man, she is spot on. She's a Sagittarius with a bullseye for vision. Let's see who's in the chat room today. Let's see who we got today. There's Ian and Ani. Hi, Ani. And Donna. Hi, Donna. And Joe and Maury and Dawn and Jennifer and Judy. Yeah, let's see who shows up. I again apologize. I just had to try to put together the semblance of a show. And I still, I have some bones for the show, but I'm not sure completely. Because one of the things I want to talk about today is this idea of love and universal love and agape. And I always thought it was quite interesting that Valentine's Day, which again, I think is just kind of a hallmark holiday in a lot of ways. But it's interesting that it's in the month of February in an Aquarius. So it has a very universal appeal. One would think that maybe a true Valentine's Day, because we're talking about matters of the heart, that it would be in the month of Leo, because Leo rules the heart and romance and all the other things associated with the heart and feeling and those sorts of things. But it's not. One would think that maybe Valentine's Day would be in October, during the month of Libra, and relationships and contracts and bonds with other people. But no, it's not. Perhaps one might think that Valentine's Day could even be in the springtime, maybe the month of May, where everything is in a very powerful cycle of growth and sprouting. The sun in the northern hemisphere is really starting to peak, and there are feelings of renewal that could be also connected to the heart, but it's not. Valentine's Day happens to be rooted in the month of February, which makes it an Aquarian celebration. When we talk about Aquarius, we talk about the group, or we talk about friends, or we talk about foundations or associations or larger chunks of society in a lot of ways. So I could see where if you're going to get the most bang for your buck with a Hallmark holiday, February might be the best month to do this. But it talks about, in some ways, or speaks to the transformational and to some degree the transcendental power of love. Love is a very interesting thing. It's an interesting component. It's an interesting piece of our experience. And I don't know. I mean, I could make a case that the world that we're living in, at least on the surface, has departed in a lot of ways from personal love. And what I mean by that is if we go back in time and look at the songs of the 1960s and 70s, we go back to the 50s, a lot of the songs tackle this idea and the state of love. And of course, that generation, or the generation that popularized a lot of those songs, were Pluto and Leo people. And of course, Leo rules the heart. So I mean, let's think of Smokey Robinson. He might be a Pluto and Cancerian person, but I think he's Pluto and Leo. I think of Smokey Robinson and the love songs of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, or other famous love songs during those periods, that time. We don't have them anymore. Those ballads, those wonderful pieces of music that connect you to your heart, they don't make them anymore. It's not there. So we're moving out of this very deeply personalized expression of love. And, even on the internet, and I'm not a Luddite. I love the internet. I mean, here I am, I'm talking to you on the internet, but what do we do on the internet? We throw up, hearts to one another, the emoji. And I'm not saying that heart emoji cheapens love. It actually allows us to show a form of expression to people. And by the way, I always think about sending that heart emoji. Well, at least I did. I'm getting less critical about sending the heart emoji, because when I send the heart emoji, now it's like, oh, I'm just going to open my heart. Here, you can have a heart emoji, right? What's the harm in it? What is the harm in sending the heart emoji? For a while, I was thinking, geez, do I really want to send this heart emoji? I mean, what is the statement that I'm sending with this heart emoji? And the other side of me is like, oh, come on, man. Just, don't be so white and uptight. Just send the heart emoji, man. Who cares? I'm thinking, well, if I send that heart emoji, it kind of maybe cheapens the heart emoji. That if I only send the heart emoji to certain people, then when I send that heart emoji, it'll really mean something. So I got into this whole debate about the heart emoji. And now it's like, okay, you get the heart emoji, but maybe when I'm really wanting to make it personal, you get maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 heart emojis. So now we're into sort of the hierarchy of the heart emoji. But it's interesting because even like with this experience, having this show and doing these streams and broadcasts, and connecting with people at the event. And by the way, I was really struck by how many Aquarians were at the event here in last October and here in the Hill Country. And what it does for me is it is creating, for all intents and purposes, a greater field of love. And it doesn't necessarily diminish or dissolve, denature, I think, this potential for love. In fact, I think it could be even bigger. And it feels like that's kind of where we are now. At least that's where it is for me. And I've got Venus, Moon, and Mercury all in the 11th house. So It definitely is kind of an Aquarian exercise for me, but it feels like that's where we are. And it's also a very interesting exercise in being able to handle and to a lesser extent channel some of these feelings of relationships, because I get sent a lot of emails, and people will send me texts, and I've never met some of these people, and sometimes I'll be honest with you, I can't even put a face to a text, and I've got lines of text that I'm texting with another person, and it's been interesting to be able to have the capacity to hold the space for a number of different interactions and layers of relating for me, so that I can integrate it. And it's been a very interesting exercise, because as this thing has progressed and as it evolves, I find that I have a greater capacity in a lot of ways to maintain a connection with a number of different people across a number of different sort of life circumstances, platforms, and relationships, which I think is kind of unusual. I don't think it's an everyday sort of occurrence, but it also feels to me like it is something that is more about the future. People ask me, well, what about the Aquarian age? Somebody asked me, could you do something on Pluto and Aquarius and the Aquarius age and Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius? And yeah, I could, and probably I will, and I've done a lot of stuff on the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius is, when is it going to start? Well, it's happening right now. And we're creating, I don't know, I wouldn't call it the manual, but I think we're creating the map, or we're I guess a manual and a map. I think that would be maybe appropriate for what this age of Aquarius thing is going to look like. And one of the things, again, just speaking from my own personal experience, is being able to connect with people in a lot of different ways, and in a lot of different levels, a lot of different layers, a lot of different backgrounds, without diminishing the capacity of self. And that for me was, for a long time, is very, very difficult. And what I mean by that is I could hang out with a number of different people, but when they all came together, I'd have all these complex relationships with all these different people. And so I wouldn't know where to necessarily be within that. But then there is a sort of the atom, and you could connect in with the atom, and it all has kind of a contextual value in a lot of ways. But we're always merging, and we're always dissolving, and then we're reappearing and setting boundaries again, which is the dance of relationship. But it's gotten easier in a lot of ways, and I feel like that's really kind of this core of the Aquarian experience, where each and every one of us, we know who we are. We know who we are, and we don't have to prove it. We don't have to proclaim it. It's just a matter of being able to own it, manifest it, live it, breathe it. And then from that place, and we are able to interact on a number of different levels, in a number of different ways, a number of different layers with a wide array of people. And if we each do that, if we each have that awareness, then we don't even really need any organizing principles, because the organizing principles already been worked out in here, that the divine blueprint can manifest itself in everyday affairs and who we are, what we do. And the Aquarian age, for me, also in terms of this, because we're talking about it from a Valentine's Day perspective, being that month of Aquarius, isn't really, it's not a diminishment of the capacity of self, and it is not as an aggrandizement of the capacity of self. It is the isness of the self. And when we're all connected in that place, it's all good. It's all good. And we can understand the dynamics between any different level of relating that we need to experience in that moment. And I think that's where we're headed. So maybe a bit of that sentimentality or the lament, this kind of idea of a personal love, or some of the ideals that were written about and quite beautifully and sung about quite beautifully. And even in terms of movies, there are movies about relationships and love that are very powerful. Although those weren't the ones that I went to as a kid. I had very different ideas about it, but I'm sure I could nail a few. Some of them are not always easy stories. Sometimes love stories can be very difficult love stories too, on many different levels. Anyway, but I think the Aquarian age does have something to do with this idea of Valentine's Day, that it's this universal kind of agape, or this esprit de corps, and I feel like we're probably going to need it. We're probably going to need it because I think we're going through some very interesting times now, and this is I think related to Corona and the fallout. We haven't even really begun to see the fallout yet of this thing. And I think we're probably approaching a tipping point here. And it'll be very interesting to be a witness to this. I keep thinking of that, was it Gabriel Garcia Marquez? Is that the author's name? Love in the Time of Cholera. I think that's the name of the book. I haven't read it, but that title sticks out to me. Love in the Time of Cholera. It's an interesting title for a book. So we're gonna need each other. We're gonna need each other, and then again, this gets into the Aquarian mindset that we're all part of, some greater group or some greater family, some greater kind of organelle, and there will be a time when we'll be very aware of that. And I think a lot of the internet stuff has been a primer for it. I've been thinking about it. And I know the internet is very complex, and there are people who have very different relationships with the internet than I do. In fact, I probably have a very simplistic relationship with the internet, although some of the relationships might be more complex. But I think the internet's been priming us for this. It's been priming us to connect in ways with people that are not always third dimensional, not always flesh and blood, although it is quite nice when people do become real and they do manifest, which I've always liked. It was, when I first started off, and I'm not a huge group person, but I've been on message boards and things like that. And I would always try to meet people from message boards if possible. I liked that. I liked it when people became real, and see how that relationships or those relationships could take off and are fostered in other areas and other ways. So when this happened in October, it was great. I loved it. I got to see everybody and interact with everybody, and certainly looking forward to our next gathering and get together. But I do feel like the internet's been working with us to create these relationships that have an air of informality and intimacy and connection in a way that we may not have been able to ever experience it otherwise. So in a lot of ways, social media and the internet is kind of the precursor for the Aquarian age, and that it's catalyzed a number of these relationships. And even look at things like Bumble and Tinder. I mean, they're Aquarian tools. And there are some people who've actually had success with some of those things. And then prior to that, of course, you had Match.com. Again, it's a very interesting kind of time that we're living in, and it is taking us out of sort of this fifth house relationship with Leo and romance and the sun. And maybe, and I've always thought about this, like there would be a time when we would come to a point where we would have a very different relationship with reality. And we would have more of a sense of conscious sense of being connected to the Godhead. Like, it would be like in the garden, out of the garden, and back to the garden. And then when we get back to the garden, we would be less individual in some ways, but we'd be more complete in other ways. And maybe even more of our divine selves in other ways. But it would be that very poignant moment where we realize that, who we were and how we related and a lot of the social customs and traditions and the things that were part of our experience are over. And that there would be kind of a bittersweet sort of like when you leave your family in a lot of ways. And when you leave your family, it's bittersweet because you're leaving your family. These are people that you've known and loved, but you get to experience something on your own, something new, something different. And it's felt like that for quite a long time. And I would almost go into the future and look back on kind of who we are, where we were, with a sense of poignancy. And not that the future would not be something very profound and interesting, but it'd be different. And we wouldn't have the same kind of sentimentality in a lot of ways. Right. And it feels like we're just we're really starting to creep up at that, because one of the things that if I look at like this coronavirus, it is a global event. It's a global event. So it links all of us. Right. And I see people talking about like we're seeing things with China we've never seen before. Never. We're seeing the oppressive hand of the Chinese government, which has been always kind of in the background, and we knew it was there. We knew that if those people colored outside the lines, that they're going to have not only have their crayons taken away, but a few other things as well. And now we're seeing it. If you're cruising around the internet, you're getting stuff on Twitter. I mean, I saw this thing on Twitter. It was mind blowing. These people were coming as Wuhan. These guys were coming in like jackbooted thugs, and they come into this. These people were sitting around. It was an open air area. Okay, like they're like, fuck it, man. There may be a coronavirus thing going on, but listen, we're gonna live our lives accordingly. It's like, fuck this shit. We're gonna play Pai Gow, and we're gonna eat whatever. But it was open. It was like open to the street. These guys come in, they got masks, and they start roughing people up and smashing their table. And there's other stuff. I mean, you could spend the whole day on Twitter now, or you could go over to Reddit, maybe 4chan, and you can see stuff. It'll blow your mind. And it is not pretty. What we're seeing is not pretty. We're seeing a country descend into panic. An entire country is descending into panic. And we're seeing the overarching plutocrats, the people who run the system there, they're cranking down hard. Remember, this is the South Node in Capricorn still, and we've been talking about how things are being revealed, what's behind the scenes. And it's not just here in this country, the United States, although we're seeing that still. It's also in China. Anywhere where we're seeing the overreach and the overarch of government, we're seeing that now, especially in China. And now we're seeing people cry out for democracy. because they're realizing that the state that they've been living in has been oppressive, and now it's coming to the surface. So it's connecting us on a global scale. And I see people who are actually feeling empathy and pain for, and how can you not? I mean, granted, the government and the ruling body there are very draconic. They're draconian, man. I mean, think about how they established that party. They killed millions and millions of people. Millions of people. The Cultural Revolution. And while it's not as bad as it was during the time of Mao, it is still a very oppressive and restrictive place to live. And we did a deal with the devil with them. But I see people now watching these people who are really suffering, and they've got a lot of empathy. They have a lot of empathy for these people. So it connects us up at a global level in a lot of ways. And we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg on this thing. Just the tip of the iceberg. And it feels like to me that it is we're getting close to a tipping point. And what I mean by a tipping point is that at a global level, like the awareness is going to shift. And we're still kind of isolated and pocketed. We're trying to kind of figure out and track this thing. We got to figure out whether or not, DHS is going to get called in and what that's going to look like. I mean, these are things that if you're not thinking about them, you probably may want to just think about it a little bit. You may want to. And it could be something where, we get to 11 minutes and 59 seconds to midnight, then everything kind of pulls back. There's possibility of that as well. And I'm not here to spread any panic but I am, or being alarmist, but I am somebody who thinks that, try to cover as many bases as possible, see as many angles as possible. It's called being prepared and to the best of one's ability. But it feels like there's going to be a tipping point where there's a global consciousness and a global awareness. And one of the things about the way that this world has been created and managed is that there are going to be certain groups that are going to be immune to certain types of suffering. And there are other groups that won't be. And those groups may have a different kind of suffering that they're immune to, while the other groups aren't. A lot of it tends to be economic. It tends to be economic. And what will connect us will be a sense of large numbers of people suffering, or at the very least, the awareness of these people in pain and suffering. And it'd be great if we could do it in quote unquote love, but it doesn't feel like it's headed in that direction. So what happens when we do reach this tipping point and we do have this global awareness? Then what happens? It'll be interesting. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. And the one thing that I would say more than anything is let's do our best to stay away from fear, because that's going to, it's not, look, you can be alarmed. You can have a sense of alarm. I think that that's warranted, but having a sense of fear is paralytic, and there's a difference between the two. So we're at a tipping point, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And I was talking with my good buddy Paul the other day from the UK. Shout out to you, Paul. And we were talking about the state of affairs in the world, and where everything is headed, and we were talking about a correction, because everything is so out of balance. It's so out of balance. There's no real sense of balance or integration in the world. It's, what's happened now is we've reached the sort of the other side where things have become very exclusionary in a lot of ways. I was watching this interesting video from, I think it was from University of Virginia, go figure, and it was this young woman who was at this diversity meeting, I guess this diversity group. And she basically said, we got too many white people in here. You got to leave. You got to go. Just come on, get up and go. And that's what I talk about, being out of balance and being exclusionary. And it's just one kind of, it's just one example. One of the things that the internet has also done is it's created a culture of hate, in as much as it's allowed us to connect with one another in more complex ways. It's also created a culture of hate. And and I'm not even talking about like, so-called neo-Nazis or whatever. And by the way, if you ever find a neo-Nazi, can you please like send me their email address so I can talk to them? Because I'm still not convinced that these dreaded neo-Nazis and their organized groups in power actually exist. Sure, there are people who may want to have like separate identities or separate states or whatever, and I don't even have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to live together, fine, go do it. Happens all the time already. There are areas in certain American cities that are essentially small representations of the countries that people have came from. Do you think that they want to be living with other people or be sort of inclusive in their own way? The answer to that is no. So let it happen. So I don't really have a problem with that. I don't. If you want to live together, then live together. I don't think that there's anything wrong with any of those models. We should be allowed to live how we want to live without it being labeled. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But we've created this culture of hate. And I can see it on Twitter. And one of the things that because everybody's anonymous pretty much. They're anonymous on Twitter, and so they can go after somebody, and they can burn somebody, they can harass somebody, they can make somebody feel small. And one of the things that we have lost touch with is the ability to allow another to save face, which is a very Japanese kind of concept. Like the worst thing you can do in Japan is to lose face. So in Japan, they make it so that you have opportunities to not lose face. Like the person that you're dealing with will give you an out, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to write something on the internet and I thought to myself, how is this going to affect that person? How is this going to affect that person? Like if I turn the gas on and light it, how is it going to affect that person? And I still have to police myself with that because that's where we get into trouble with social media and the internet. Nobody's allowed to save face. It's like, screw that. Let's just rip their face off. And that's where we get into the 2 or 3 minutes of hate. And that's the other part of the internet. So people ask, well, what can we do? What can we do with the way things are and who we are and the conditions? A lot of it has to do with this idea that we can treat people with a little bit more respect if they deserve it and offer them the opportunity to save face, which I know sounds like minor, but it's true. And sometimes, we can be impatient and frustrated and tired, and it can be difficult. But you got to take care of yourself so you can, at the very least, say, I'm going to go take a nap or something like that. But it feels to me like we're moving towards a tipping point, And the tipping point has to do with global awareness and the global awareness of suffering, or the global awareness of imminent threat, or the global awareness of people finally waking up in the midst of a potential global nightmare. And this is going to be, it's kind of like when I was watching some of this video from China where these people were in their apartments and they were all calling out to each other, and they were all having these, they were encouraging one another to stay strong and to be able to see each other once again, and to be able to move around in the daylight and, breathe the air that, even though it's probably polluted as shit, outside of their apartments. I mean, that was what it was about. It was totally about that. I mean, and how can you not be moved when you see something like that? And you begin to think of, well, what would happen if that was me? What would happen if I was in that situation? How would I feel? What would be the most important things in my life at that point in time? And you can hear this stuff. I can't understand. I mean, you can't understand Chinese, but you can only imagine, what they're talking about. This is it. This is the tipping point. This is where we become aware of the anima mundi, which is the planetary soul. It's a very Aquarian kind of thing. So the Aquarian age, well, we might be knocking on the door right now. We're a few years away from Pluto and Aquarius. And I think that there are dark, dark, dark manifestations of the Aquarian age. It's not all love and light. It's just not. It's not like we're all just going to wake up and, singing the I'd like to teach the world to sing song. It's not going to be that way. I think the Aquarian age is going to take immense amount of responsibility. Immense amount of responsibility. And we're moving away from Capricorn. And we're moving away from things like governments. But that's where the Aquarian age comes into play. Remember too, now corporations are also part of the 10th house. But it's interesting watching corporations morph and remake themselves. Corporations now are coming off like they're your friend. Like, we're your friend. We're the good old corporation that's always been there for you. And we're the good old corporation that'll be there for you in your future. We're your friend. And we're friends of your family as well. We relate to you. We have the same values as you. Make us your friend, which is a very Aquarian kind of thing. We're part of your group. Let us in. I've seen this all the time now with commercials. They're repurposing themselves. We're your friends, and we're your new family, and we're going to help you create the new family. And you can see this with commercials. Like, the big thing that's selling in commercials now is mixed relationships. And man, you'll get them going any which way. Like, there's a Verizon commercial now. And it's all about 5G, and they have their families there. Every family they're using are mixed. And it's like, look, it's a family. Isn't this great? It's a family. It's family values. We're behind family values. Again, true note in Cancer, that's a very different family. It's a very different family. And this is what they're doing. Not because they're also promoting their agenda. Right? They're promoting an agenda, and the agenda is essentially creating a group of people that have no historical context. They get to create a new history with people that are, well, I'm this and I'm that. I'm not saying you can't be this or that. I don't have a problem with people being this or that. Trust me. Some of the most interesting people I've run across in my life have incredibly diverse backgrounds. It's just that they're promoting this and they're pushing this, right? That they're creating, we're creating the new model. This is the movie we're showing all the time. And so by showing the movie all the time, we're going to have you participate as actors in the new movie. This is not the Aquarian age. This is their version of the Aquarian age. This is what they're selling. And the Aquarian age is something very, very different. It's people coming to a realization, a very, very deep realization about who they are and what their purpose is and how they're here to fulfill their purpose. And then from that point forward, all these other people here find out who they are, what their purpose is, and how they fulfill their purpose. Then you come together and you create a bigger purpose. That's how it works. That's how it works. It's not some kind of marketing commandment. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Let me show you some of the downside of potentially what we're seeing with a model of the Aquarian age. Now, I've talked about the surveillance society, and that, by the way, very much be a big part of the dark version or the anti-Aquarian age, where everything is on a 5G network. All your appliances are set up on the 5G network. You can blink your eye and turn your faucet on, stuff like that. But they're all communicating. They're all talking back and forth. They're all sending information to a massive data hub about usage, time, all kinds of stuff, right? And that's just part of it. And you've got the RFID meters, and you've got the 5G, and everything's just humming on this system, including the Panoptical Society, which is a surveillance, which we're already living in. You leave your house, you're on cameras, probably about 65 to 70% of the time. And that's part of it. That's part of the all-seeing eye, of the Aquarian age, which connects all of us. Theoretically, that's so. Let me show you one of the downsides of this and what it really looks like. It does have to do with China, actually. Let's see, where's this? Oh, here we go. And this is from MSN. To me, again, this really speaks to that South Node in Capricorn kind of, how do I say this? Almost karmic transparency that's taking place. Reuters: coronavirus brings China's surveillance state out of the shadows. When the man from Hangzhou returned home from a business trip, the local police got in touch. They tracked his car by his license plate in nearby Wenzhou, which has had a spate of coronavirus cases despite being far from the epicenter of the outbreak. Stay indoors for 2 weeks, they requested. After around 12 days, he was bored and went out early. This time, not only did the police contact him, so did his boss. He had been spotted near Hangzhou's West Lake by a camera with facial recognition technology, and the authorities had alerted his company as a warning. I was a bit shocked by the ability and efficiency of this mass surveillance network. They can basically trace our movements with the AI technology and big data at any time and any place, said the man, who asked not to be identified for fear of repercussions. Chinese have long been aware that they are tracked by the world's most sophisticated system of electronic surveillance. Now, keep in mind, China is an Aquarius rising country, right? So what we're seeing here is kind of a precursor or a shadow, an imminent shadow, and they have Moon in Aquarius on the ascendant. Artificial intelligence security cameras boast that their systems can scan the streets for people with even low-grade fevers, recognize their faces even if they're wearing masks, and report them to the authorities. If a coronavirus patient boards a train, the railway's real name system can provide a list of people sitting nearby. Mobile phone apps can tell users if they have been on a flight or a train with a known coronavirus carrier, and maps can show them locations of buildings where infected patients live. Although there has been some anonymous grumbling on social media for now, Chinese citizens seem to be accepting the extra intrusion or even embracing as it means to combat the health emergency. In the circumstances, individuals are likely to consider this to be reasonable, even if they are not specifically informed about it, said Carolyn Big, a partner at law of DLA Piper in Hong Kong. Now, if you're reading this, and you've just read the first few articles, first few paragraphs, and you're not Chinese, how are you feeling about this now? Does it seem reasonable to you? Does it sound, oh yeah, okay, I get it, for the greater good? I get it. We're being tracked and spied for the greater good, especially during a crisis like this. Telecom companies have long quietly tracked the movements of their users. China Mobile promoted this as a service this week, sending text messages to Beijing residents telling them they can check where they've been over the past 30 days. Doesn't that building look like it has Peronis? It's not quite straight. It's not quite straight. They have medicine for this, apparently. Let's see. It did not explain why users might need this, but it could be useful if they're questioned by the authorities or their employers about their travel. Well, if they already have that and they're tracked, why would they need to be questioned unless they want to be caught in a lie? In the era of big data and internet, the flow of each person can be clearly seen. So we are different from the SARS time now, epidemiologist Li Lanjuan said in an interview with China state broadcaster CCTV, comparing the outbreak to a virus that killed 800 people in 2003. With such new technologies, we should make full use of them to find the source of infection and contain the source of infection. So now this article is being spun as very positive, right? The industry ministry sent a notice to China's AI companies and research institutes this week, calling on them to help fight the outbreak. Companies have responded with a flurry of announcements touting the capabilities of their technology. Facial recognition firm Megvii said on Tuesday it had developed a new way to spot and identify people with fevers with support from the industry and science ministries. Its new AI temperature measurement system, which detects temperature with thermal cameras. Think about that now. They can detect your freaking body temperature with a thermal camera. Wow. There's already being tested in the Beijing district. So they're rolling out the technology as a test here. SenseTime, another leading AI firm, said it has built a similar system to be used at building entrances, which can identify people wearing masks, overcoming a weakness of earlier technology. Surveillance camera firm Zhejiang Dahua says it can detect fevers with infrared cameras on to an accuracy within 0.3 centigrade. In an interview with state news agency Xinhua, Zhu Jinsang of the China Academy of Railway Sciences explained how technology can help the authorities find people who might be exposed to or confirmed or exposed to a confirmed suspect of coronavirus on a train. We will retrieve relevant information about the passenger, including the train number. So this is an article that's selling exactly what I'm talking about. There's really no dissent there whatsoever. But this is what part of this dark new age would look like, and it could easily be instituted even more during a pandemic or a crisis. And as we're seeing with China, they're working out the technology. They're getting the bugs out. And of course, there's more. There's absolutely more that would be a part of that kind of scenario, which I've talked about for a long time. And the lighter side of it, obviously, is for people to take personal responsibility for who they are and their gifts, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations, and then align this. And it will be aligned. You don't even really have to, like, if you're totally aligned and you are doing what you need to do and you've worked past a lot of stuff, you'll automatically meet the people you need to meet. You'll line up with the people you need to line up with, and this whole thing will self-assemble. That's the way it is. It'd be self-assembling. Where it doesn't get self-assembled is when we have, the particulates come into play, and then people who will, that's what I'm looking for, they'll abandon their consent. They'll abandon their consent. And that's the tricky part. So it feels like we're at a tipping point, and it could be actually a really good tipping point. It could be really, really good. I mean, I'm thinking about something positive here, and something that has a unified potential for all of us in a lot of ways. So it's a bit of a different spin on where we are with this thing. But on Valentine's Day, I think it actually might be helpful to look at it from the larger perspective and the larger picture as to how it connects and can connect and probably will connect all of us on some level now. Right? We're all sharing information. We're all trying to kind of sort through things. Some of us are having emotional or semi-emotional or feeling responses to this. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And it might not all be bad. It could be very, very connecting and very empowering. It's just another way to look at it. All right, let me check in with you guys. Let's see where you're at, because I got one more story I'm going to go through. A story that really touched me, and then I'm probably going to call it a day. Let's see where you're at here. I was thinking the same thing about Ani's new license plate. What is that? Ani's license plate? Stay off my tail, pig. Is that your license plate? Abigail Love. This is what I was referring to with using Aquarius, Uranus, higher knowledge for malefic purposes. What else? There's no such thing as greater good when it comes to government. Yep. Did you guys get a kick out of my Peroni's thing? Let's see what else we have here. People flip when I say I've been involved in occult study for years. That's exactly where I'm coming from. Does anyone else? Oh, Coniferous Forest now. Someone else has Leo in South Node and Aquarius in North Node. I don't know how hard I've abused my power in past lives, but I feel I have to pay for the abuse of authority in the limelight this time around. DD, or is it? What else do we have here? Let's see. Walmart getting ready for FEMA action. New gates and chutes installed to hurt us. That's quite a possibility there. Why can't you go back to what you missed, Judy? I didn't get a notice. It was late. Oh. So you go back for, okay. So it's about going back in the broadcast. Put $100 in your microwave. Renders it useless in a casino. That's interesting. I got an RFID protected wallet. You can get those. Let's see. Christine says, healthy, well-adjusted humans self-regulate automatically. Absolutely. They poison our world view to obfuscate that fact. Yep, I agree. I would get some other NSA stickers to put on the bumper or front window. Play the game. That's good. Good for you to bring out the positive side. Yeah, why not? I had a car whose tag began with DEA. Oh, that's funny. Anything else? We got anything else here in chat? Let's see. Abigail says Aquarius, Uranus is higher knowledge. We can choose this in a way that's beneficial for all. But some malefic personalities will use this in a very inverted way like they already do. Yes, that's true. Chinook says, if anything astrology teaches us is that cycles repeat over time, there won't be a breaking of the cycles. Eagle ZXZ says, pain forces people to look at why life is as it is, growing. And so that's absolutely right. 100%. Dawn says, someone in my group planning on going to China in March seems not to be bothered by it. I don't even know what to say to that. You probably would say, adios, friend. I have an RFID blocker in my wallet. It's pretty cool. So, like, theoretically, if I were to go into a casino or a Walmart, they won't be able to scan how much money I have in my wallet. It also keeps people from stealing your credit card information. Although I don't have any credit cards, I do have a couple debit cards. It's just nice to have. All right, I wanted to bring up this other story here because it does touch on sort of what I'm talking about in some ways, about sort of this new paradigm, the dark Aquarian paradigm versus a different kind of paradigm. It also does touch on love, but a different kind of love. So this crossed my path today, and it's actually heartbreaking. And it's when you have a group like the United Nations, which is a very Aquarian group, by the way. It's really funny, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about a couple shows I've done recently, and some of you guys who are in the chat will remember some of this. I did a show where I was talking about the United Nations, and I was kind of like honed in on the United Nations. This was maybe, I don't know, maybe about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that. I'm sure you guys might remember this. I was talking about the United. I think it was on Sunday Night Astro Live, actually. And I was thinking about it, and I was talking about it, and now today I've been reading that the United Nations has said every single country on Earth can and will be subjected to UN forces as a result of any global pandemic. So the UN is essentially letting people know that if they need to, they will be on the ground, right? So this is a global unit, right? The UN, this wonderful governing body, has basically told people that, hey, get ready because we're coming. We're coming. And I've been talking about the UN for a while. I mean, not for a while, but there's that one show. It's like, I was like really honed in on the UN, and now it's starting to kind of manifest. And I did this other show where I was talking about the fog, and I was talking about this high incidence of fog around the United States. I don't know if you guys remember that. But then I talked about how the Reaper would show up, and like they would see this in fields in Europe. They'd have this like very foggy like effect in these fields in Europe, and this guy would show up, this cloaked figure with this thing that looked like it was a scythe and it was reaping the fields. But there were people that thought that the fog was being emitted from this thing, right? And then after that, they would experience some kind of pestilence, and that it would be connected maybe to this Reaper figure who might have been cloaked in some kind of a hazmat suit or something like that. And usually during a time when people's consciousness and awareness were starting to reach kind of a new level. And I was talking about that, and it's like, here we are, 6 weeks later, and we're dealing with this Corona thing. It's weird sometimes, where we talk about certain things from the future, possibly. And I'm sure we all do this, right? I'm sure we all do this. Anyway, I just wanted to, it was banging around in my head. So the UN, this is why I got the UN thing going. The UN has been in charge of essentially changing the migrational patterns of the entire planet. The UN has mandated, along with the help of the Catholic Church and a few other groups, mandated that there will be new people living in places like Sweden, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain, so on and so on. Sweden, I think, taking the brunt of this. Sweden, of course, being brain dead socialists, more than happy to bring other people into their country because it gives them some sense of, I don't know, empathy, compassion, whatever. But it's at a cost, and it's at a price to pay. Here we have this kind of Aquarian body dictating how people are going to live and who they're going to live with and why it's important and good. And let me show you what the downside of that is. Absolutely heartbreaking story. So this guy is 88 years old. His name is Rolf. Swedish independent journalist Joachim Lamotte recently interviewed a 90-year-old homeless, I guess was he 90 now? Is he aged? Homeless man in Trelleborg. The man, Rolf Hansen, doesn't receive any housing assistance from the municipal social services, and as a result is forced to eat, sleep, and live in his car. He has worked and paid taxes his entire adult life, but now risks living his last days as a homeless person. in Sweden since the municipality refuses to help him with a home or a nursing home, Lamont wrote on Facebook. The outspoken journalist also urged his readers to put pressure on those responsible so that Rolf does not have to live in a parking lot. During the interview, tears run down Rolf's cheeks. Is this how it will end? Says the 88-year-old man. Where's his family? Question mark. According to the municipality, there is no place for Rolf in the nursing home, even though he's almost 90 years old. When Lamont and Rolf visited the municipality office, the staff said it is his own responsibility to find a place to live, and they couldn't help in any way. The two of them initially refused to leave the office before they could talk to his superior, but no boss came to talk to them. Within just one day, Lamont's film got over 1,500,000 views on Facebook. Again, this is a very Aquarian kind of response to this guy, right, through Facebook. The leader of the Sweden Democrats Opposition Council in Trelleborg, Helmuth Peterson, says that the party immediately after hearing about the case sent out people to find the elderly homeless man. He's been found now. I just got a call 5 minutes ago that he's on his way to a hotel where we will install him. Is he like a faucet? We will provide food and shelter until the municipality takes its responsibility, Peterson says. The SD politician says he is convinced that Rolf would have received help immediately if he had another surname. It's obviously the case that if you have a different last name, you get help earlier. He has a regular surname, and then you may not get the help you're entitled to, he concludes. Shall we watch a little bit of this? Shall we see Rolf's plight here? Let me hook this back up. Here we go. Let's see what Rolf has to say.
Så här är det, jag sitter just nu i Trelleborg med Rolf som nästan är 90 år. Han är en av Sveriges äldsta hemlösa. Och det vi sitter i, det är hans hem. Han har alltså inget hem, han bor i sin bil. Och jag är här för att göra ett reportage om honom. Och det här
Just watch him, even though we can't understand.
Frågan var, är det så här man ska sluta? Och det vet jag ju, det är det.
Rolf har flera gånger bett kommunen om hjälp med boende. Hans önskan är att antingen få ett rum med kokvrå eller att få komma in på ett äldreboende.
Det är väldigt konstigt att jag inte är gammal nog till för att komma in på ett äldreboende. Snart 90 år. Tycker jag det är konstigt.
That's his home.
Har kommunen sagt att du inte får bo på ett äldreboende?
Nej, det har inte plats.
Finns ingen plats?
Nej. Inte.
Har de sagt det till dig?
Ja.
Vi är på väg till socialkontoret här nu i Trelleborg för att höra om det finns någon som jag kan få prata med om Rolfs situation.
So I guess you're going to go see somebody here.
Hej, ursäkta. Joakim Lamotte heter jag.
Hej.
Jag är journalist. Jag gör ett reportage om Rolf här. Jag skulle gärna vilja prata med någon ansvarig på socialtjänsten och som har hand om äldrefrågor i kommunen. Har ni någon chef eller något jag kan få prata med?
De finns inte här i huset.
Var finns de?
No.
De finns ju utspridda över hela kommunen.
No.
Finns det någon chef man kan få prata med här?
Inte här. De finns inte här i huset.
Men jag följer med Rolf in ändå.
Men det får inte
Nej. Och så kan ni kontakta någon chef så länge.
Det bor vi där inne.
Jag bor i bilen.
Ja.
Det är min bostad.
Att hitta det tillfälliga boendet, det ligger på ett eget ansvar. Tyvärr är det ingenting vi kan hjälpa till med. Är du med?
Nej, jag kan säga att jag är inte med för det här gäller ju en bostad. Ett äldreboende, vad som helst.
Mm. Har du gjort ansökan om alltså att du borde fylla på?
Ja, jag har varit där i morgon.
Turned away.
Nu sitter jag och Rolf här på socialkontoret i Trelleborg och vi väntar på att någon chef ska komma som vi kan intervjua. Vi tänker inte gå härifrån förrän det kommer någon chef helt enkelt. Hur går det? Kommer det någon chef?
They're not leaving.
Ursäkta, fick ni tag på någon? Så vi kan göra det. Ja. Men kommer det komma någon chef som vi kan få prata med? Har ni ringt till någon chef jag kan få prata med? Vi behöver ju få prata med någon som har lite ansvar här. Vi sitter där och väntar. Men det kommer aldrig någon ansvarig som vill prata med oss.
Och nu vet jag att jag får ett boende. Men... Och då tänker man ibland på att ellers är livet slutskedat. De kan ta livet av folk genom att bara att genom ett boende. Det är jobbigt.
Arbetsmarknadsförvaltningen eller då?
Ja, hej. Joakim Lamotte heter jag är journalist.
Hej.
Jag blev ombedd att kontakta dig för jag var inne på socialkontoret här i Trelleborg med en man som heter Rolf Hansson och som inte har någonstans att bo. Han bor i sin bil.
So you guys get the gist of this. This guy is living in his freaking car in Sweden. There he is. Let me just turn down the volume on it. Let's play it a little bit more. This is how he has to sleep at night. Eating his dinner. And this is somebody who's paid into the system. He's paid into the system his entire life. And he's not able to, reap the benefits of that system. And yet, to me, again, this is like the dichotomy of, the dark Aquarian age and the quote unquote real Aquarian age. And real Aquarian age, that guy, he has an opportunity to, have a place and a context, and he's not on the streets. He does have a seat at the table, and it's not exclusionary. This is exclusionary. It breaks my fucking heart to see this guy like this. And I guess the good news is that at the end of the day, this film actually pressured the government of Sweden to actually do something about this, which is a good thing. So I just brought that up because it's another, it's one of the aspects of feeling an emotion in love. What we saw there was pathos. That was pathos. Another aspect of emotion love is eros. And then the other potential and emotion of emotion love is agape. So Rolf's story takes us into a state of agape and being able to understand and see the suffering of another. Agape is it's not quite like eros. It's a very different energy, but it is kind of a resolution of pathos in a lot of ways. So what does it all mean? Where's it all going? What do you need to know? Well, I think as the seconds and the minutes and the hours tick by and the days tick by, I think your awareness should grow accordingly. And there's nothing stopping you or anybody else now to come into greater and more full awareness of your life and your situation and what's important to you. And if it's not, you're wasting time. You're wasting your time and you're wasting other people's time, because that's another commodity that we're working with. So in this day of Valentines, right, where we have this idea of love and connection, realize that we're all connected in our own way, even the disparate parts of who we are, which may seem very extreme to us as reflections vis-a-vis other personas. But even those strange and odd pieces of self are part of who we are. let's just make sure that they're not always a huge part of who we are all the time. They're for a lesson, right? You want to say hi to Rosie? Oh, there she is. It's like a little cat. Yeah. She's, I'm here for a little of that agape. Give me some of that agape. All right. Let me see. Let's see who's in chat as I begin to migrate out of here. See where we are. Let's see. Eros is the love of beauty. I love listening to older folks' stories. Yes. Hey, all day today. Sounds like it's been a good show. Dawn is having a good moment in the chat. Cruiser says that now he can't work, so he's eliminated. The psychopaths don't honor agreements. There's a lot of truth to that. Is Rosie a spy too? Is Rosie a spy too? I think so. Rosie's like Mata Hari. I'll tell you what Rosie really is. Rosie is she's a defender of the property. Let's put it that way. In a way that Jasper, and since I'm her property, she's a defender of the property, right? All right, I'm out of here. I'll be back on Sunday night. And I'm going to have LaFay Farrar come on. She'll be interesting. Well, she already is interesting, but I haven't talked with her for a long time. You'll love her. She's wise, generous, been doing this for a long time. So we get a bit of a different perspective. You know, the astrology of love, twin flames, soulmates, all that stuff. And she's legit. I'm telling you right now, she's totally legit. I wouldn't bring her on if she wasn't. In the meantime, from my heart to yours, have a great Valentine's Day. Thanks, everyone, for supporting the show. And we'll have Raw back on in 2 weeks, hopefully. Next week, it is the return of Regina Meredith. And we're going to be talking about Regina's outlaw self, since she's been banned from various social media platforms. Can't wait to hear all about that. In the meantime, have a great Valentine's weekend. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'll see you guys on Sunday night.